Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hairy Dancing News. Hey,
Hello.
Chewy. Hey, mate. Doing well?
Good.
How was life in central Dunedin today? Was it upset by tractors going up and down the main roads?
Look, everyone in this town fucking loves to bitch about the roadworks and stuff like that, but by God, it saved me from a parade of tractors. I saw one tractor, and I figured that everybody else got lost. I did see a news report that they went up the main highway, but that's not the main shopping area. And I think I saw a picture of like 3 tractors parked in the Octagon. So, I mean, from what I'm reading, this big Groundswell protest today was a bit of a fizzer.
It didn't look anywhere near as big as perhaps was being predicted. Wellington looked particularly small, but I heard people talking about Wellington because it's one way in and one way out. It's not quite like Dunedin where they can come from the south and come from the north, or Auckland they can come from the north, the west, and the south. So I think Dunedin was always predicted to be a bit of a small. Sorry, Wellington was always predicted to be a bit of a small one, and I think it was. But yeah, it didn't look massive to me. It didn't look massive.
Yeah, the picture I saw from Wellington looked like protesters were outnumbered by people having lunch. So yeah, I think and to see that that's their result after getting bolstered by Voices for Freedom. Oof,
Yeah,
good decision there, guys. Jesus.
It's interesting. It's like I remember learning about this phrase when America, like I think in Desert Storm, actually, maybe it was Desert Storm, or maybe it was after 9/11. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. When the Americans armed Saddam, and then eventually that and the Taliban as well, and that turned full circle against them. They armed the Taliban because they were fighting Russia. Enemy of my enemy is my friend. And then all those weapons that they armed them for 20 years later were being used to fight against Americans. And I wonder about this idea of just joining forces with parties that don't seem to really have a lot in common. Because they all hate Labour. That's basically
the only thing that binds them together.
Yeah,
like Voices for Freedom was an anti-mandate thing, and the mandates are gone now, so they don't have a purpose. So what they wanted to do was latch on to Groundswell, but I think like it hasn't helped Groundswell. It hasn't helped Voices for Freedom, and all I can think of is good.
I think, and it's been particularly interesting watching some of the instigators, as they're talked about in Fire and Fury, to that Wellington protest and where they are today. And of course, one of the ones with the biggest platform for a while was Chantal Baker. And I really do think it looks like it was a time and a place situation for her, because look, no green-eyed monster here, but she's bigger than us. Let's just put that out there. She has more more following than we do, but she went from sort of the peak of more people engaging with her content than the mainstream media to a YouTube channel with 4,000 followers sort of thing. And when she got banned off Facebook, those 100,000 people didn't migrate anywhere. So I wonder if what happened was those 100,000 people in the time of that protest were all looking into either see what was going on because they were interested in what she was saying, or were interested in the general hubbub, but there wasn't anything to then follow on to then move into the next thing. And probably Voices for Fuckwits is going to be sort of the same thing as well. They might not have anything. It's a little bit like, I've heard this before. This sounds a little bit pessimistic. I'm being a bit of a prick about this, but I've heard the argument before that Greenpeace needs to have like an eco disaster every 90 days to pay their payroll. Like they need something every 90 days to send out information about. I don't know how fair that is, but I guess what I'm saying is when you have things in the news, you stay relevant. And their one thing was that Wellington protest and the mandates. That's now gone. What else do they have in the news to keep them relevant? I think Jaunty's got it though. Bots don't migrate, mate.
Well,
Hey,
look, it's worked for Chantal. She's got a European holiday out of it.
yeah.
And every morning I get up and to check to see if Zelensky's Secret Service has managed a black bag her for running around Odessa trying to stir up trouble. I've never seen someone more out of their depth.
So listen, tonight we are going to talk a bit about the I was going to call it a parade, like it's the Santa parade, the Satan parade. No, the parade.
The world's shittest Christmas parade.
And what I've done this afternoon is there was a Dunedin representative on the AM show this morning called Lucy Thomson. I actually managed to catch up with her this afternoon, so I've had a chat with Lucy. I originally was going to chat with Lucy for 10 minutes to use in the show, but as you know, I can be a tad long-winded. No, it's actually because the style that I have when talking to people is to let them talk. I don't often Karen Plunket people and just shout over them. Although in this interview, there were some points where I did have to go, look, that's not what we're going to stay focused here. But I ended up talking to Lucy for 50 minutes rather than 10. So what I've done for you lovely patrons out there is the whole thing is up on, there it is right there, is up on Patreon. So when we, funnily enough, talking about Chantal, when we had our Chantal conversation, which went for 2 hours, and that whole decision was made that long form conversations would go up on Patreon and we'd play clips in the show. Well, we're going to do that tonight. I've got a couple of clips from this conversation that we're going to play tonight. So Lucy was a part of Groundswell Dunedin. She was one of the leaders of it, I think. And she gives us her perspective on what it's about. Now, people who understand us and understand what we do, they'll probably look at me talking to her and think, this is a lovely time. This is a lovely time. Oh, look, people have already seen it. Because this is what I was going to say. Look, you were very polite in the interview with Lucy, Pat, says Gareth. Gareth, you've already watched it. Should I only upload it?
We're never going to build our audience if you're polite with everyone. We've got to chase the money, and the money is just calling someone up, dumping them live on air and calling them an idiot.
Look, I mean, I think the summation of the conversation from me is what happens is I want to let people who come on, I want to give them the respect for coming on. So I'm not going to, I want them to be able to tell their story. What that does for people who want to see blood on the floor is they think it's platforming someone and giving them a chance to share their abhorrent views, if that's what it is. Actually, I shouldn't say that about Lucy, because I'm not saying that. But what it does for me is it gives if I've got a point to make, or if I've got a counterpoint to make, I don't need to cut you off to make it. You can make your full 3-minute diatribe, and then I can make my point in 60 seconds as long as I make my point. And I'm okay with that style. Some people aren't. If you are already a patron, then you can go there and watch that in its entirety at some time. And if you're not a patron, then actually it would be a great time to become one for a couple of reasons. One is you can go see that full conversation with Lucy Thomson, and that's already been, Gareth has already told us that I was polite. Notice Gareth didn't say it was good. He just said it was polite.
The devil's in the detail.
I'll take that. I mean, that would make my mum happy. Doesn't have to be good as long as I'm polite. But also this weekend, we are going to be having a bit of a Q&A session for anyone who wants to join in. So Saturday morning, 11 a.m. For those of you who are patrons already, you'll be getting an email probably tomorrow. I'm assuming I still haven't worked out how to do it, but I'm assuming with something like a Zoom link. And we can all jump in together into the Zoom and have a bit of a chat about what's going on, what you guys like, what you don't like. So the reason it'll be a good time to join up to Patreon in the next 24 hours is you can jump in on that first kind of group conversation if you want to be involved. So that's here at patreon.com/big hairy news. Right, but before we get into it, Chewy, there is only one question to start the show tonight that everyone's been talking about for the last 24 hours, and that's what happened with the floors.
Oh, okay. So I've worked out something. I've worked out.
Does it rhyme with Masmestos?
No, I've worked out that my builder must listen to this show.
Oh yeah.
Because shall I put it up? Shall I show people?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you want to. I mean, it does show the filthy rich SOB that you are, but you're welcome to do it.
Oh yeah, no, rolling in it, absolutely rolling in it. Where did I put it? He says
it'll be on your stupid sideways screen. We do know that.
Oh, you love my sideways screen. Anyway, I arrived home to. Oh, we want the before. We want the before. So this
While,
was
while you're looking for it, Rob's waiting for the Q&A in the big hairy hot tub, which just sounds like I've got about 12 females who live in this house. It sounds like the plug hole in my bathroom. That's what that sounds like.
So this is was last night. So as you can see, absolute disaster, and we just found out, that we needed to do something with the floor that we didn't know how to do.
Yep.
And our builder was very much like, we'll just work around it and you can sort it out later.
Yeah.
This is what I came home to.
Wow, that looks amazing.
So like half assembled kitchen, but they had stripped back the floors like they said that they weren't going to do, and it's also partially sanded, and now it's changed our minds. We're like
totally polished floors, bro. No vinyl on that.
Do we polish those up? Look at the color.
Yes.
So good. So yes. Now I'm nowhere near as stressed
as I
was last night.
Put it back up. Because the question for I was reading a text about the hot tub. The question for the hot tub, no, the question for the chat, polished wood floors or linoleum/vinyl? People, polished wood floors or linoleum? Can you zoom in on the wood a little bit? Because it's beautiful. It's quite nice.
I don't know.
You don't know. Polished wood floors or lino, people? What are you saying? I'm 100% polished wood floors, without question. Polished wood floors through everywhere, except for in your hallways and your bedrooms, if you can. That's what I'm up for. All right, let's get into it. We're going to be here for 6 years.
No worries.
We are going to start tonight talking about David Farrier. Now,
yes.
I put this conversation up last night, sort of a little bit lighthearted, right? Because Sean Plunket put up a tweet yesterday, something tongue in cheek, being a bit silly. I don't know if I should celebrate being unblocked by David Farrier. And the reason we put it up to be a bit tongue in cheek is I responded to him by saying probably the same celebration I had when you unblocked me, meh. And that was sort of all I put up there, because Plunket had been talking about David Farrier on Twitter, and I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. So today, wake up this morning, and David Farrier has responded. There's a webworm that's come out, but let's first of all have a look what was actually said. So Sean Plunket put a tweet out yesterday that said this: "Hey, David Farrier." Oh, sorry, I suppose that's supposed to be has, because So let's say, has David Farrier been to any good court-ordered non-violence courses lately?
Where the hell has that come from?
Yeah, well, I know where that's come from. I can tell you, right?
What?
Hayden Donnell, who I believe is Media Watch on RNZ. I believe that's Hayden Donnell. I could be wrong, but I think Hayden Donnell and Colin Peacock do it. Responded to Sean Plunket saying, if he hasn't, then this would be a very risky tweet. Because, of course, if it's not true, that would be defamatory. Because even though it's got a question mark on it, and as Mr. Plunket and some people try to do, they think if I'm just asking a question, then I'm covered by, I'm not stating anything. I'm asking a question. It's a pretty stupid way to think of the law, in my opinion. And you can see there's a fair bit of traction there. I mean, it's not hundreds of thousands, but there's a fair bit of traction there. Hayden Donnell then went on to talk about this new film released by David Farrier, which I haven't seen yet. I don't think any of us probably have. And Hayden Donnell said, I just looked up David Farrier's new film, Mr. Organ. And it's about an obsessive man with a history of taking people in with what proves to be false information. So this is talking to Sean Plunket. Hope you haven't been fooled by anyone like that. So let's have a look, and this will get us demonetized, but we can get around that by you going to Patreon. Let's have a look at some of the trailer of this new film called Mr. Organ. In fact, before we do that, let me just read you a bit of a synopsis. This is from NZ On Screen. In 2013, a colleague of journalist David Farrier entered the office in tears with a nasty run-in with a car towing company working for Ponsonby's store, Bashford Antiques. In 2016, a TV3 expose about the shop's aggressive action spurred Farrier to dig deeper. All roads led to Michael Organ, A man with criminal convictions, a penchant for fake identities, and a lion in psychological torment. In this trailer, Farrier sinks deeper into Organ's disturbing backstory and plays cat and mouse with the man himself. Mr. Organ is Farrier's second feature documentary following 2016's acclaimed Tickled and Netflix's series Dark Tourist. So that's the lead into this story. Let's have a bit of a look at the trailer, shall we?
There's a gap in my blinds, and I keep thinking when I open my eyes, I'll see him staring back at me through the gap.
Oh, hi, it's David Farrier speaking. I'm a journalist based in Auckland. How are you doing?
Well, I'm perfect. Thank you. Bye.
A full-scale war was breaking out on the streets of an Auckland suburb.
A wheel clamper who was then demanding they pay to get their vehicles back. You are a crook.
I'm literally trying to give you $400 cash.
Uncontrolled, exorbitant, intimidating behaviour.
You're an absolute crook. You are a liar.
I know there must be more to this car park terrorist, and I want to find out what.
People won't talk because they're frightened. He's a very dangerous man.
That's his trademark. Soften them up, poison them off, then shoot them down in flames.
That's not a good thing to be probing into with our family. It's caused a lot of pain.
This man was dangerous.
How did you know that he'd been to my house?
He's talked all about you and said that he's onto you.
They give me a key to your home.
Wow. That seems quite weird. I mean, I'd prefer you didn't have a key to my house.
Holy shit.
This is fucking crazy. He knows I'm making a film about him, and I think he wants to be a part of it.
He followed me down to my bedroom and he punched me in the head 6 times.
Michael Organ is a black hole.
You're going to get taken along for the ride.
And I'll fallen in.
Well, he is a genius.
I'm literally trapped with him.
The problem with Michael is once he gets on to you, he won't let go.
You probably would have been quite an interesting person to know if you were such a couple.
Look at that face, Chewy. Now, look, I'll just...
That looks amazing. Are you kidding?
I've been in touch with David as well. We've had a few, not about this yet, but we've had some conversations in the past about getting him on my other podcast. We'll see if we can get him on to have a bit of a chat about it. But okay, so that's the first time you've seen Mr. Organ, the
I've seen this tweets about it. I hadn't watched the trailer. I actually remember the original, I think it was Nightline expose onto Bashwood Antiques and their rabid clamping. And basically, if you parked outside down an alleyway next to their shop for more than 5 minutes, you'd find a boot on your car, and you'd have to pay like $500-600 to have it unlocked. So to have this spiral out now, like 15 years later, into that trailer, literally gave me goosebumps. That looks amazing.
How much did you like that?
Oh no, it was good.
Perfect, eh?
It was good. But yeah, Farrier is a legend. Like if you have to like pick your fighter, Plunket or Farrier, no contest. No contest. Well, Dark Tourist was amazing as well. So
yeah, still on Netflix if you want to see it. Yeah, it is very good. Now, so let's get back to this conversation. So this is what's swirling around at the moment, and I can't remember whether I read it, whether I've got it highlighted. I'll have a look. But obviously, the intimation is that Mr. Organ has got to Sean Plunket and fed him some information that Plunket is now putting out there, like every good journalist does, like it's gospel. Every good journalist does, like it's gospel. Yeah. Plunket didn't go so well on the old Twitterverse when he started doing this. And I'll just give you one. I'll give you one example. He put up this tweet about David Farrier court-ordered non-violence courses lately. Someone, Warwick 512, responded. Avi Yemeni, who was on his show a couple of mornings ago, was convicted of insulting his ex-wife and is a welcome guest on your show. What's your standard here, Sean? So I was like, yeah, well, yeah. It's pretty obvious. So anyway, we're talking about this morning. Wake up this morning, and I'm greeted by this tweet. As Mr. Organ approaches, this is from David Farrier, in case you're listening to the audio podcast. As Mr. Organ approaches its November 10th New Zealand release date, an old man, backed by millions of dollars from rich lister Wayne Wright, has decided to defame me. Feel free to retweet this. I'd prefer the truth was circulated. And we get into the webworm story. So the webworm by David Farrier, which is webworm.co, if you want to go check it out for yourself and sign up, reads Sean Plunket defames me. Talks a little bit about Sean Plunket and goes into a few a few conversations, and I'll read a couple of bits out from it. It's Michael Organ, isn't it? I'm even short of the guy's name. Anyway, Mr. Organ. Mr. Organ? Michael Organ? I think it's Michael. Anyway, Organ appears to have gotten into the ear of New Zealand broadcaster Sean Plunket. If you are not familiar with the New Zealand media landscape, it's small and it can be feral. Sean occupies a strange, angry place there. And then he's got a link to what he's written about before. Platforming conspiracy theorists and anti-trans rhetoric. His website / online radio station is backed by millions of dollars, care of Rich Lister, Wayne Wright. And that's a link to the spin-off article. Last night, the man with millions behind him sent out this incorrect tweet about me, which is that one about had been on any court-ordered non-violence. You can read the whole article yourself, but I'm just giving you a couple of snippets of it. To be clear, says David Farrier, this is a defamatory statement. Him framing it as a question, the I'm just asking questions technique, is his attempt not to be defamatory, but it is. I have not been ordered by any court to go to any violence courses lately or ever, mainly because I've never carried out any violence. Mr. Plunket's insinuation is that I am violent, that I have carried out violence, but his followers listen, and now a bunch of people in New Zealand believe him. And then there's a screenshot, for again, if you're listening on the audio podcast, that says down the bottom about, you can read those for yourself. Do you want to read those out? I'm just going to do one other thing. You want to read those out, Chewy, while I'm doing this?
Yep. Hang on. I just need to make the screen bigger.
You got your glasses on.
No, big screen, mate.
Or someone just says, oh, yes, please. Someone goes, ugh, not a wokester. And then, wait, what? A nasty guy, that Farrier. More information on this would be good. So that's what's being said by some people in the tweets.
At one point, I'd say here, this is exactly how that pernicious rumor about Clark Gayford started as well, in a very similar thing. Just these sort of veiled hints that maybe he's up for drugs charges, and people just went hook, line, and sinker on that shit. People will believe this.
Yep, for sure. Farrier goes on, I know for a fact that this, quote, court-ordered violence course, end quote, is the latest piece of disinformation being propagated by one Mr. Organ, the subject of my documentary. It will make sense when you see the film. And Organ appears to have found an ally in the multi-million-dollar backed Sean Plunket. And there's the tweet from Hayden Donnell. And then Sean Plunket also talks about the trailer being removed from YouTube. Well, it's not, because we've just played it. So that's something else that's very strange about the whole thing.
You could literally go, well, I'm going to say something. Better check that it's true by going to a different tab and typing it in. But maybe his assistant had gone home for the evening.
So David talks about a few more bits and pieces, brings up, some of the replies that have been coming in, says replies will come in, Trump avatars on display, and the homophobia begins. Says the homosexual tickle boy, Fagium has blocked me, says someone from Mega. And not that this wraps up the whole piece, you can read it for yourself, but one last piece says, as Sean and others like him go around proclaiming, quote, I'm just asking questions, end quote, I often wonder what they think of their fans. And this is something we've talked about before, Chewy. When they look to see that their fans are saying, what their fans are saying, is there a part of them that goes, oh, people who seem to love my work also love saying a lot. I wonder if that's a reflection of me in any way. And this, on some level, is exactly what we've talked about before when we've talked about the alt-right conspiracy theorist QAnoners that flood to Plunket's content. Don't you have to say, therefore, and I think, what have we said in the past? If we were making a podcast or something about how to repair a car, you're probably going to get lots of people coming along wanting to learn how to repair their cars. If you've got a whole bunch of people listening who are alt-right QAnon conspiracy theorists, what does that say about your content? And I guess in a much more professional and eloquent way, David Farrier is sort of echoing some of those same comments around things like homophobia and various questions. Anyway, that's kind of the summation of all the information, Chewy. Thoughts, sir?
Oh, well, we come back to this thing that we've spoken to about Plunket. Does he believe it, or is it just a bit?
Would you like the answer to that, or do you know the answer, or should if you know the answer, should we offer the answer to the people?
I mean, both of them are contemptible, but for different reasons. Okay. Like, if he believes it, he's just a real, authentic piece of shit. If he doesn't, like, that's even more. Does it make it worse? I think it does.
So I was in Auckland.
It's that, and it lacks integrity as well.
I was in Auckland 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago, catching a cold, which was lovely. Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Auckland, by the way, you bastards. Bad too. Still kind of with me a little bit. And I had some meetings in the radio industry, and I've kind of said to you guys, "Oh, doing some work in the radio soon," but more about that later. But I spoke with some people who were very high management when Plunket was working for ZB and for Radio Live, because I had several meetings, and all of them, without question, when they talked about him, and it came up in a couple of meetings, were like, he doesn't believe anything he's saying, because they know him personally. It's all horseshit. It's a grift. It's fake. It's all horseshit. Now, people who know him are saying it's horseshit. We're kind of asking the question, if it is horseshit, what? But when you get people like Billy Takaha, who is sort of the target a lot of his content, coming out saying, when will people realize that the platform and Plunket are a sham? It's like you go down to the bottom of the barrel, and then you go under the barrel. And I guess it's a bit me saying this, because he's fooling people. They're the people who are now being attracted to the platform. A couple of people, and obviously I'm not going to mention names or stations or anything, that I was talking to in Auckland, have said very clearly, in their opinion, no one will ever advertise on the platform. They said when the Rich Listers money runs out, they'll either have to get refunded by Rich Listers or they'll disappear, because who wants to put their advert on the side of a dumpster fire? You know, what happens there is, once the fire will engulf the advert. So it won't succeed. It's looking very successful at the moment, and its way it looks, and that's because it's got $3 million behind it. If we had $3 million behind us as well, we would look fucking amazing. I mean, we look pretty good as it is, Chewy?
Yes.
Especially your background today, your pink and red background.
Well,
you should be doing this from your kitchen. If you were doing this from your kitchen, it would look amazing. Anyway, but it's not. Yeah, it's not going to work. It will hang around for a few years, because that's what a bank balance of $3 million will do, enable you to hang around for a few years. But as we said 6 months ago, 5 months ago, his dilemma is going to be, does he move to, this is Plunket, does he move to where his authentic positions are, right, and lose who the audience he's already grifted? Or does he stay in the area where he doesn't believe the things he's saying to attract an audience to get money, and then just, be Alex Jones in New Zealand? But in fact, I saw someone call him whale oil light the other day. I thought that was quite a good insult. But Cameron believes his stuff. So let's the sort of demarcation there. But yeah, so that's the truth. He doesn't believe half the time. I heard something the other day, because he does pop up on my feed still, because I watch some of his things. He's now not buying into climate change. He's now actively climate change. In fact, on his Twitter feed at the moment, it says this: remember, 97% of greenhouse gas emissions are not man-made. So he's actually going down the path of climate denial and stuff as well. Now, whether he believes that or not, I don't know. But the overarching theme is he's grifting. He doesn't believe it. It is my honest hell belief that he's grifting. But it's the worst of the worst.
Just as far as Billy Takaha and Sean Plunket, one thing sprung to mind: let them fight. I'm okay with it. When two of the worst people are having a go at each other, you just let them keep doing it.
People in the industry know you're full of shit, and the people you're trying to target know you're full of shit. Then the only people that are left over are, unfortunately, probably the most vulnerable and the ones who are most deluded. And I'm actually trying to be gentle saying that. I don't want to throw that out as a I'm not trying to weaponize that term, but I'm like, people who are really, really down the path of being sucked in by some of this stuff. And so, there's an audience there, but can you imagine Nike or Telecom or Air New Zealand or whatever wanting to, fill their planes with QAnoners? I wouldn't think so.
We've got a couple of comments that I'll chuck up. Carl says, grifters don't think, they're addicted to the algorithm. And I think that's true. I think that's what Sean's on the receiving end of. It's just, it's a feedback loop at this point. He's not going to get the big thinkers. Caitlin reckons it's a bit, but as the bit goes on and the fake it till you make it effect starts to kick in. And Nick here, it's all an act for cash.
Yeah, but unfortunately for Nick, well, not for Nick, but unfortunately, the point I guess that it's not unfortunately for Nick. Unfortunately, it's not going to. I mean, like you look at Alex Jones, and because they're in a market of 350 million people, you can get a very small sample of that and make hundreds of, or well, certainly millions of dollars. When you're in a marketplace of 5 million, that very small marketplace is not going to be monetizable in any kind of same sort of way.
No, it's hard enough for some of the mainstream guys to do it. It's just we've got a small pie, and chopping it up into smaller bits is not going to magic money out of anywhere. Here's my tiny but absolutely weaponized audience. Do you want to talk to them? And most advertisers will look at them and go, no, pass, hard pass. So then at that point, when does Plunket's money run out?
Oh, I mean, dude, I'm not to like open behind the curtains too much, but like if you, I've done the numbers for what I'd like to be able to do with this, and I've talked before about someone in New Zealand Air funding isn't, NZ funding has given out hundreds of thousands of dollars to some companies to make audio content, right? And I've put forward, not necessarily a case because we're ineligible for the funding, but just thinking about what those numbers would mean. Those kinds of numbers would keep us going for 2 or 3 years. So $3 million, maybe that, I mean, think $600,000 a year, although they probably have 5 or 6 staff. It might be $1 million a year operation. It might be 1.5. Maybe it's 2 years. I know when I interviewed Sean Plunket on the podcast, he talked about they've got 2 years. So maybe their budget's 1.5 million a year to run, and they've been given 3 million. Maybe. I don't know.
How much would a defamation case take a bite out of that?
Well, I'm also interested in these people, the rights that have put this money in, and I'm pretty sure I read, and I'm trying to remember this, but I'm pretty sure I read, maybe it was in that spin-off article, that Plunket did something about or against a politician, and one of the rights phoned up that politician and apologized. I'll check that while we're playing some video to see if it's right. So if it's correct, pardon me.
It's kind of like, I'm sorry my dog got out and attacked your dog.
Yeah. But anyway, so that's what's going on at the moment. As I said, I put a message through to David Farrier. I'm pretty sure I haven't heard back from him because I think he's based in Los Angeles at the moment. Yeah. And I think I saw him traveling somewhere else for an international film festival. We'd love to get him on, and we'll get on. Caitlin's also saying that the office space for the platform is on Manners Mall. I mean, yeah, that could be $20,000 a month. Who knows? Depends where it is. So it could be a lot. Anyway. It's fascinating, and this is one of those times when there's no broadcasting standards. So the only thing really that can happen, not that the broadcasting standards is particularly effective, the only thing that can really happen is legal proceedings, and that looks like what we're going to be looking for. So let's have a look at what happened today. This is speaking of conspiracy theorists and that. Let's have a quick look at this Groundswell conversation that went on. And look, if you want to have a look at our full conversation, we're already getting people watching it. Actually, it's quick to get it up there. Graham says, I really enjoyed the way you interview. I heard nothing from Thompson that persuaded me that her arguments hold water. Indeed, she raised several flags with her comments. So that's on the full 50-minute interview is on Patreon if you want to go check it out. We'll set up what happened today, and then we'll actually play a couple of clips from that conversation. But if you want to see it in its entirety, it's on patreon.com/Big Hairy News. Right, let's have a look at the Silver Fox himself and see what happened with Groundswell today.
Across the country, farmers took the tractors to town today, protesting the government's plan to reduce agricultural emissions. Beef and sheep farmers fear their livelihoods are at stake. Reporter Yvonne Tahana has more.
Farmers all revved up for a fight. Groundswell members trucking into towns up and down the country, taking to the air too and the backs of utes.
So last Tuesday, the government announced the worst assault on New Zealand farmers and rural communities in a generation.
They're unhappy with the government's proposed agricultural emissions pricing plan.
The government wants to introduce an emissions tax that will rip out 20% of sheep and beef sectors production.
In Canterbury, many were worried about the cost to rural communities. This beef farmer wants the environmental work he's already done to be recognised.
The government have said, we're going to tax you on your emissions, but all our existing vegetation, including the grass that grows, native trees, shelter belts and stuff, are not to be counted under this policy as sequestering, and that's fundamentally unfair.
In Auckland, they drove over the Harbour Bridge with some support from residents who brought...
So before we go on, two things. There's something pretty cool about being in a tractor going over Auckland's Harbour Bridge. I'd actually like to do that one day. I've walked over it, but it'd be kind of cool to go over in a tractor. Now, I just wanted to bring to our attention as well, and I'm sure Chewy, you'll bring this up, the voices for whatever they're called, voices for fuckwits group.
Fuckwits.
This is when I said, Chewy, yeah, you can see it because the fonts and the signs that are being used by this protest are the ones that they produce.
Man, so they can get some professional signs printed up and distributed, and they look professional in such quick order.
Yeah.
Wonder how much a rush job on those costs.
Yeah. All right, so we'll keep going, but I just wanted to bring that up.
Their own issues.
People who lost all their jobs because, let's say, they were not vaccinated or so, like the nurses.
Police had warned about the potential for traffic disruption today across State Highway 1, but so far the traffic across the bridge has been free-flowing.
In Wellington, the turnout was mostly on foot.
We have to realise that this is busy time for farmers. This is springtime, right? Everyone's flat out on tractors doing docking and all the rest of it.
The turnout not troubling the Agriculture Minister.
Bouncing for them.
Why?
Not as many as they thought, I guess.
Yeah, I don't consider our Minister of Agriculture. I think it'd be better suited as a Minister of Unemployment myself.
The Prime Minister, more diplomatic.
My focus is on working constructively with our food producers to get the best possible outcome for them and for New Zealand.
Consultation is open on the emissions plan until November. Yvonne Taha.
Chewy, thoughts?
Yeah, look, if I was the Minister of Agriculture, I probably would have just shut the fuck up, to be honest. That was not a good soundbite for him.
It's not good to turn the sprinklers on at Parliament grounds, is it? It's that kind of thing.
No, I just don't think that's going to play the way that he wants it to. Look, I Chewy, private citizen, may have said something very similar to that before we went live to air, but I'm not the Minister of Agriculture. Yeah, getting Voices for Freedom involved, bad idea. Really, really bad idea. You like, if you've got a legitimate beef, pardon the pun, stick your message. Don't get anybody else involved that's just going to dilute that message, right?
Yeah.
The other thing is that the guy in Ashburton that was saying, "Oh, they're not counting my grass as a carbon sink." That's because it's not. You know, if he was talking about wetland, sure, regenerating native bush, awesome. Shelter belt, no. Shelter belt isn't a carbon sink; it's a shelter belt. Grass is food for your cows, which they will turn into methane, which is the problem.
Yeah, we talk a bit about that in the conversation as well. The other thing is let's put up a little one of these as well. This is another conversation. This is from this morning before. Oh dear, look at that, sexy. Before the actual protest, and two farmers, Derek Bull and Dean Jenkins.
That's a great name, farmer.
They're pretty good, eh?
Derek Bull.
And they were asked what should happen then. Like they were asked, like, should anything happen when it comes to emissions around farmers and that kind of thing? And this is what they had to say.
I think we're all contributing to it, and agriculture's had its share, but we have been improving for many years with riparian planting, and which whether it's making a difference, I don't know. But at the end of the world, we're less than 0.25% of the emissions worldwide. Even if we took New Zealand clean off the world map, whatever we do, it won't change much. We can bang away at the government's door at the moment as much as we want. We can bang away at the environmentalists as much as we want. I don't know what to improve, but
so Dean,
yeah, we've.
Dean, I want to bring.
There you go. I just wanted to give you a snippet of that as well, because that comment that he makes about 0.25% we bring up in the conversation with Lucy.
I love that. That's where they go. You know, we're such a small country. What's the point? Which has famously been the New Zealand attitude to everything, right? We're too small. Why bother?
Yeah, we can't do anything about.
There's no chance that we'll
giving that woman the vote thing. We can't. We're too little.
It won't make any difference. So why bother? It's disappointing to hear. I want to bring up the fact as well, like a lot of the times you'll see the talking like, no farmers, no food, all of that sort of thing. Again, New Zealand is a net exporter of our agriculture product. Most of what is made in New Zealand heads off overseas because you can get a better dollar for it. And then we have a lot of imported food here because the people that we import it from get a better price than they do at home. There's so many stories out there about New Zealand products being sold cheaper in overseas supermarkets. It drives me batty when everybody's getting absolutely thrashed in the supermarkets.
And better as well. I often have, I've had friends coming across from Australia looking at our kiwi fruit going, what the fuck are these? Ugly, disgusting, what we call first grade things.
We get the BC grade.
They get the export grade, and our first grade is our second grade, and our second grade is our third grade. So, yeah.
So we get the stuff that they can't sell overseas or won't make it overseas. And the price that we've paid for that, like, you go back 30 years, the Canterbury Plains was for sheep. Didn't use up a lot of water. And it was for sheep meat and wool. And now it's dairy because that's where the money is. And we've done that very New Zealand thing of putting all of our eggs in one basket, and we've gone full on dairy conversions. And we're intensively fertilizing and super intensively irrigating land that was not meant for it. It won't stand a drought. It's ruined the water table. My family has a batch on the banks of the Rangitata River. You can't drink the water out there anymore. We've got to take bottled water because the nitrate levels are so high, and that's because it's completely surrounded on all sides by dairy farms. You can't swim in the river anymore. That's the price that we've paid. And then the slightest pushback of like, maybe we should review this. Maybe we should review artificial fertilizer. Maybe we should look at reducing our methane emissions and that sort of thing. It's not just because of the global, climate change thing. It's not just our tiny piece of the pie. It's also right here. What is the effect that it is having on us right now and in the near future? We cannot do intensive dairy farming in the Mackenzie country, in the Canterbury Plains, and keep doing it because that bill's going to come up. I think it's personally past due. And we need to diversify. And if these guys don't see it, you've got to show them. And this is part of it. It's like, cool, you don't want to do the methane tax? Cool. Do something that's not producing methane.
Cool.
Something.
Yeah, let's start to have a look at some of the conversation from today. Like, as I said, the conversation I had with Lucy Thomson, who is one of the leaders of the Groundswell movement here in Dunedin, was in the lead car in the protest today on the motorways and stuff. I talked to her for 50 minutes. It's on Patreon if you want to see it. But let's have a look at a couple of clips. So, Chill, you haven't seen these yet, so I'll give you a chance to respond to them after each one. The first one is, even though they go into other conversations, we start the first topic talking to her, trying to ask her what she thinks the government is trying to achieve with these new legislations. It's like, what do you think the government's trying to achieve with this? Like, what's it all about, in your opinion? And that's where we'll start these clips, and we'll be back shortly. I better turn that on. I'll be back shortly to play you a couple more as well. Here we go. What do you think the government's trying to achieve? What are they trying to do with these, like the latest regulations that they're bringing out around, paying for carbon, for example, paying for emissions? What are they trying to do?
Well, okay, I'll be direct. I think the virtue signaling tax, because we're the only country in the world that's putting farming in an emissions trading scheme. Now, under the Paris Agreement, no food producing land was to be impacted by this. We've already lost tens of thousands of hectares to pine trees. And for farmers, we can have trees on here. So we've got, I'm looking at least 5 kilometres of pine trees in a tree lane. Can't count that. We have 12.
It's 5 o'clock.
12,500 acres of grass and scrubland and beautiful snow tussock and other smaller tussock. But no, because it's not a woody plant, so it has to be a woody plant, and it has to be in a certain size area, all clustered together, and it's not allowed to be a certain age, and it's not allowed to be this, that. It's sort of like I'm just wondering. I don't know all the science. I honestly don't know all the science, but I just do know that all plants require nitrogen, and they require, which they get for the atmosphere, which is over 70% nitrogen, and they require carbon dioxide in order to grow. And when temperatures warm up, like now in spring, the earth warms up. That has sequestered through the roots of the plants carbon, and the nitrogen is being released. The natural nitrogen is being released. It's been stored in the roots of the plants while they go to sleep in the winter. And then the animals are coming along and they're eating that, and then they're pooping that back out and putting it back into the cycle of photosynthesis.
But I mean, okay, so this is probably the first question I should have asked, which is a bit ridiculous, shows what a poor interviewer I am. Because when you say you don't know the science, because to be honest, I don't really know the science either. But what I would normally do when I don't know the science is kind of default to people who are the experts, who do know the science. I guess it would be interesting to know where you stand on this to get a gist for the conversation, which is, do you think that, for example, carbon emissions are a problem? Do you think that, man has an effect on climate change? Because if your position is no, not at all, then that sort of almost ends the conversation, because then there's nothing that can be said between two parties that would ever convince one or the other. But do you think that there is an issue with, carbon emissions that is causing an issue to the globe, that, we're being told that the agricultural sector in New Zealand commits 50% of those emissions within New Zealand? Do you accept and buy into that science or not?
I don't know. I don't buy into the 50%. I don't know. I get confused about weather and climate change and why it went from global warming to climate change. I don't understand how money, by taxing us, by coming at us with a stick and making it to the point where we make, it's not us, we could lose our job if they sold it for trees. So what it comes down to is any business. So, for example, if your business is not working, it would fold. If this business is not working, they've got 12,500 acres of land here. They're going to think, okay, how can I make money off it? And if that's going to be from trees, then that's going to be from trees, and that's going to be all those stock that produce food is going to not be here anymore. We've already seen land sold nearby that has gone into trees, quite an area of it, and that brings a whole myriad of issues as well. And I just don't see how taking the money off somebody fixes the problem. So you explain to me.
Okay, I'll give you a scenario as to why. Yeah, I'll explain. I guess I'm also not an advocate for government policy here, but I mean, like, to me, what a fine is, or as a stick, as you say, is an encouragement for people to do the opposite. I mean, the reason that most people don't drive 70 k's an hour in a 50 zone is they don't want to get a ticket, which has got money attached to it. So I think that's the carrot. Sorry, that's the stick, which is if you charge people for whatever the quote unquote offence is, and I'm using that word because I'm thinking more about the speeding thing, then the reason people either don't do it or change their habits is they don't want to pay the stick. So I think that using the stick can change behavior. Now, I'm not advocating it's the best way to change behavior, but it certainly can change behavior. And I guess if we come back to that question of, is this a thing? Like, is man-made climate change, are carbon emissions, are emissions an issue? And if you say you don't really buy into the 50%, that's sort of, that kind of, I'm not saying between you and I, Lucy, but that's kind of the end of the conversation, because
Yeah,
because I'm not because I mean, if we were to have a debate, which we're not having, but if I were to have a debate and you were just to say, well, I don't believe in it, it's not what you've said, so I'm using the extreme version, and I was to say, well, it's true, then we're at an impasse for the actual conversation. I guess I wanted to look at it and think, is there a pollution emissions issue, whichever word we want to use, within farming overall? You're saying not at your farm, cool, we accept that, but farming overall, and if there is, how do we deal with it? You know, other industries, I think about like the TY smelter, or you know, like in Huntley, there's the power plant. They emit various forms of pollution, and they either get fined or they sort the problem out, and they're not just able to pollute freely as much as they want. And so I'm trying to figure out if this government regulation, acknowledging that some people are going to get caught up in a coverall, they always do. That's the definition of people slipping through the gaps, is overall better for the country or overall worse for the country. Like I heard one of the guys on the AM show this morning say, you know, we're only emitting 0.25% of the world's carbon emissions or emissions. How can we won't make a difference even if we clean it up. Following that logic though, we should be cool to say, well, we can double that, no problem, because then it would only be half of 1%, because that still wouldn't matter. So I just wonder about if this is going to make a difference, if we can make a difference. The flip side to that is also this conversation about the world is looking for things like carbon miles and stuff for the products right now. Going into our training partners, they're looking for quote unquote clean, I'm using air quotes here for people who are listening to the podcast, looking for clean food. And one of the things that I'm reading, and I'm not an advocate, but I'm reading, is that this may make our product more valuable in the international marketplace, because there'll be a better chain back to a clean green type image. Is that virtual signaling or not? Is that good business or not? I don't know. I'm trying to figure the whole thing out. All right, a couple of quick things for people who are wondering. I don't know Lucy, and I don't know her farm, although I'm been invited to go out, and I might go out and have a look. It sounds fascinating. She's explained to me that they all swim in their waterways and they're all doing it right and they're all clean and that sort of thing. And so several times in the conversation, whether you hear the full version on Patreon or where you hear these, I don't kind of get into the nitty-gritty about her particular singular farm, because it's not about that. It's about the overall issue. So just so if you heard me say, let's not talk about your farm because your farm's fine. What I'm doing there is based on the rest of the conversation, where she's explained from her perspective that they're doing it right on their farm, so they shouldn't have to be caught up in the legislation. So that was that. The other thing I wanted to say quickly, and I didn't have this to hand when we were talking, she made a claim about the Paris Agreement and how it's not in the Paris Agreement. That's fake. That's false. Because the claim that this tax breaches the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement, an international climate agreement between 197 countries, commits signatories to strengthen their response to the threat of climate change, quote, in a manner that does not threaten food production. So she said that food production is not included. The actual agreement says it doesn't threaten food production. So that's slightly relative. The story goes on to say, our government committed to this, though it's just one of the priorities that parties must balance. Countries also promise to, for example, keep the global temperature well below 2 degrees centigrade and ideally 1.5 degrees. Experts say the latter goal requires cuts to agricultural gases. So that's the actual Paris Accord. Anyway, Chewy, yours, sir.
Yeah, I mean, never go on and say I don't understand the science and then ramble about it for ages. Look, there's a couple of things when they talk about sequestering carbon and that sort of thing and using the right plants. I don't understand why she doesn't understand that. Like, you grow a tree, you lock that carbon up until the tree is burnt, basically. That's why it's a woody plant and not grass, because grass is not sequestering carbon for very long at all. And the reason that they'll be saying certain types of plants is, again, if you grow pine trees are in the ground for 25 years and then we cut them down. You're not sequestering that carbon for very long at all. What they're saying is regenerating native bush, planting around wetlands is an excellent carbon sink, and that is something that we have done through our farms massively, is drain wetlands. So if farmers, and there's a lot of farmers that know this, they know there's lots of farmers that are regenerating their wetlands because it's not super productive farmland anyway. So
Yeah,
they
right.
might as well. And those guys are going to reap the benefits of that because there will be some sort of offset. The other thing is when you consider the markets that we sell in globally and we get top dollar for, we're competing, as say Europe or America, we're competing against their farming and their protective methods. One of the things that they'll always use against us is this has traveled halfway around the world
Yeah.
to get here. The carbon miles on our products is massive. So if we've got that and we're shirking our responsibilities elsewhere, well, then the moment that a government decides to be protective towards their own farmers, that's when the door's going to get shut on us. So let's get ahead of that problem. And then the dumbest thing, I can't tell the difference between weather and why did people call it global warming and now it's climate change. It's because you learn. You learn things. You know, every time people said it was global warming, it's like, oh, well, it's a bit cold now. It's climate change, unseasonal weather, more frequent and more severe storms. We have seen that here.
Yeah, I did find it interesting.
Happening now.
I did find it interesting that there was a lot of I'm not sure, I don't know sort of responses when it's someone who, I'm not saying that Lucy is the leader, but obviously has some kind of organizational position. Her phone number's on the websites, and that's how I found her. So some kind of organizational issue, and it sort of surprised me a little bit. And it just makes me think of that. You know, my background is kind of in the church, and you get those people sitting in a church who just hear what the person up the front says and then tries to re-spout it as literal gospel. It kind of has that sort of feeling to it. No disrespect to Lucy, I very much appreciate she came on, but that's sort of the vibe it gave me. I'll play you another clip now, and this is only 4 minutes because one of the things that I was fascinated about is federated farmers are on board, and if federated farmers are on board with this plan, what does that say to the farmers? Because they're on board. So let's have a quick look at this, and then we'll be back. Because federated farmers seems to be on board with this emissions scheme, fee, whatever it is. And I've got their website here, and I'll just read it for people who don't know. This is federated farmers say federated farmers recognises that New Zealand has made a commitment to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions in accordance with the Paris Climate Agreement. We also understand that emissions from agriculture account for half of New Zealand's total emissions. Our emissions profile is globally unique, and because of this, the way we design climate change policy is also unlike any other country in the world. We are working closely with the government as they implement the climate change agenda. We were involved with the working groups on climate change science, including the Biological Emissions Reference Group. Federated Farmers is a signatory to He Waka e Noa document, which outlines the primary sector's climate change commitment to reduce net on-farm emissions. So I read that, and I watch the articles that came out last week, and I go, Federated Farmers are on board. So where are they wrong from a farmer?
Well, you could go have a look at their membership list and you could see that they have lost a lot of farmers. And
so farmers aren't happy about that, you're saying?
No, they're not happy with Dairy New Zealand, and they're not happy with beef and lamb either. There's been
because what I'm wondering, Lucy, is you've said 3 or 4 times in this conversation, I don't know about the science, I don't know about this. It seems that the people, and look, who seem to be in the know, the working groups, the people who are at the pointy end, are on board with this. And you guys are saying this is wrong, but you're also saying you don't really know about a bunch of it. So I'm trying to figure out maybe somewhere in the middle is the truth, and how we as the general public find that.
Well, possibly you're right. Possibly there is, you know, a standoff between the two. But at the same time, you're dealing with, I'm a practical person. We're out there, we're in it, we're doing it. These guys are in offices working with bureaucrats, with politicians, and stuff, and their business is to be in the tent with politicians, and they're not necessarily coming back. We haven't had the opportunity to communicate with them, so we are not members of Federated Farmers anymore as a result of, we didn't feel like for a decade now that they have not been listening to us in these areas. I've been through the mediation process with council and with regard to regulations that are coming in, and Federated Farmers were there, and they were doing their part. So were other industry, rural industry bodies, but they're not. We're wondering, you can often say that we're not on the same page, but we're in the same book. At the moment, we don't even feel like they're in the same book as us.
So Federated Farmers doesn't represent you, and you're saying doesn't represent farmers at the moment. Is that basically what you're saying?
Well, I can only speak from our perspective and other people, that I associate with and that are hands-on farmers, and they just don't feel the representation's there.
I'll tell you why I think they're on board. And I'm not in the industry, so this is utterly layman talking, right? Utterly layman. But I read a lot and I research a lot and I look into a lot and I follow a lot of the information in the news. I reckon this is why they're on board, as is Dairy New Zealand. I reckon they're on board because they know that something needs to happen, and they know that it's going to be a cost to the farmers, and they've been given such a sweetheart deal by the government, because the deal that's come out about climate emissions, carbon emissions, it's a 95% discount. So every other business gets charged X amount of money. The deal that's been offered to agriculture is only 5% of what other businesses are paying. So I think Federated Farmers and Dairy NZ have probably come on board going, shit, we've got a 95% reduction here compared to, I don't know, let's say TY, or let's say another industry like this. And I think they've probably come on board realizing that something's going to happen, something needs to happen, and actually only being charged 5% when other businesses are being charged 100% is a pretty sweetheart deal. And I think there are some within the community, business community in particular, who are pretty annoyed that this deal has been offered to the farming sector or the agriculture sector, if we're fair, that they've only got to have to pay 5% of what other businesses have to pay for a similar sort of number of emissions. Chewy, sir, yours.
The vibe I got off that was kind of like what Voices for Freedom said when they said that hundreds and hundreds of nurses and doctors were leaving their jobs because of the mandate. And it didn't seem to be true. Because she's not happy with Federated Farmers. And because they've left that, and because they felt that they weren't listened to, so the best thing that they could do was leave. It just seemed like she was projecting that out on the farming community as a whole. Mm-hmm. I'd love to know some hard numbers rather than the vibe. So I don't know if either of us can track that down. But judging by today's protest, it can't be that many.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what that would mean overall. I mean, there is in fact, maybe I'll try and get him. There's a really interesting farmer up in Central Otago who's been featured on Country Calendar, who has a really different way of farming, regenerative and like growing, letting his fields regenerate fully before he lets, herds back in or stock back in. It's a really interesting way of doing things. Maybe I'll try and grab him and see if we can get him to have a bit.
And that's not a revolutionary way of farming either.
No,
it's an old way of farming.
Yeah, it's the guys who I think is it 42 below, the people who sold 42 below.
No, I remember that story.
Yeah. So I've got him lined up for a podcast hopefully at some stage, but maybe I'll see if he's around tomorrow to see if we can have a bit of a chat, but we'll see. All right, listen, there's one more clip, unless there's anything you want to say, because the last clip is talking about, remember what I've done is talk to Lucy in a respectful way, because I respect the value that she came and had a chat with me, and she has said to me that their farm is not polluting the streams and that kind of stuff, and I have no knowledge otherwise, so I'm happy to accept that as a part of the conversation. But what do we do about the actual polluters? So that's the next little clip that I've got for us. Do you want to add anything else now, or should we just fire that off?
Kind of semi-related. The one thing I want everyone to keep in the back of their minds, right, is with an election next year, it is enormously in a lot of people's interest to stoke an urban-rural divide. So I'll just keep in mind who would benefit from that. And I'm not necessarily talking about political parties as well. I'm talking some of like the lobby groups and that sort of thing that may benefit from this sort of stuff going on.
Cool.
Not really related to what our interviewee has been speaking about, but I think it's something worth bearing in mind.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. In fact, we can Google this during this clip is being played. But is Groundswell the group that's funded by the Taxpayers Union?
I think, again, if I'm remembering correctly, there is some tie-in there. They kind of poo-pooed that by saying, oh, we just helped them set up a website at the start. But I would be of the mind that the ties are a little closer than that.
Well, let's not put out false information. I'll Google that as we're doing it. And just before we do it, what I love most of all is comments that say that we're not qualified to talk about this, as we're talking to someone who says, I don't know the science. So if we're not qualified to talk about
the show,
then nobody is. All right. So this conversation,
I am a farming expert, and that is clearly what I said right at the start.
Let's have a chat now, a segment now, which starts off with talking about, so what should we do about the polluters when it comes to emissions, when it comes to pollution, when it comes to what they're putting in their waterways. And then we'll be back after that to wrap up. I think it's fair to say there are other farms out there, not as good as you guys, who are polluting worse, or who are polluting.
Let's go find, not fine, but find them and help them sort it out. And that's what I mean. Don't take the blanket approach. Let's find them and let's, as a community, help them out, just like we'd help out other people in our community and other situations.
What do you mean as a community? What do you mean as a community? Are you saying the farming sector go and help them? Are you saying keep government out of this altogether?
Oh, look, I'd love government right out of it altogether. To be honest, honestly, I just feel so divorced from them. They don't understand what it's like to be on the ground in the coalface.
But surely you also know that's impossible. I mean, like, because that following your desire you just mentioned there to the nth degree, government out of things. You're saying farming because it's your world, but follow that down. Government out of housing regulations. All of a sudden, you've got houses that are being built that aren't to code. Like there is a place for legislation above things to keep things safe and healthy, hopefully, and to a standard that in some parts of the world that doesn't have that. And I'm not actually saying this in support of this government, but I'm just saying in general, we want our buildings built correctly. We want, as much as possible, our farms not to be polluting the waterways, whether they are or aren't. Let's not debate about that. And I think that most of the time when you see self-regulation, I've been involved in the media landscape for a very long time. Self-regulation does nothing because people then can choose to ignore it because it's self-regulation. So I understand that it must be frustrating. Well, I think that's fair. I think you can get over-regulation as well. But I'm still trying to kind of figure out entirely, and I guess we're kind of coming to an end now, and look, thank you for your time. It's been much longer than I said it was going to be, is that I'm not in your world. And from the outside looking in, my layman's moron's position is, of course, I want to not pollute our environment as much as possible. If this is what is happening, then if the sector's not going to clean it up or hasn't cleaned it up thus far, the only solution seems to get legislation involved. Now, you're telling me that legislation doesn't need to be involved because the sector is cleaning it up. And I guess that's where the conversation kind of comes to. I don't have all the information to say whether it is. You tell me that it is. And I don't know if there's too much more to add than that, unless you want to add anything, Lucy, because you're welcome to wrap up.
Oh, look, I think you've summed it up quite well. I think what you've just said about us being able to not, I get the regulation thing, and I hear you with the building, and like I said, there's over-regulation. It's trying to find a balance. We're trying to find the balance. At the moment, it's all feels a bit lopsided. So let us find the balance. Let us find the balance where it's not going to kill our industry. And I know that sounds a bit hyperbolic, but it truly is. It truly is. It sounds strange, but the math, when you sit down and do it, it's quite decimated.
I mean, when you say find the middle, I mean, I guess, again, from someone outside the industry and outside the knowledge bank, I kind of think being charged, quote unquote, charged 5% on a charge that another business is paying 100% on seems to be a pretty interesting middle ground to me. And what would be the fair result? What, 1%? No percent? Agriculture still not paying at all for any of their emissions?
Yeah, I don't know. 5% in theory sounds little, and I don't I'll be honest, I don't quite understand that whole 95% or the 50% emissions. I mean, if agriculture is doing it all, what are our emissions, Pat? So what's the other 50%? Is that the planes? Is that the Marsden Point? Well, not Marsden
I guess
Point.
so. I mean, I think individual. Every time you start every time we start a car up, every time you drive a car down the street, there's emissions. Yeah, like I assume it's all the other things. I'm burning my fire here in Dunedin. I haven't done it for a few days. It's been quite warm, but when we're burning our firewood, we're creating emissions. And agriculture. I'm saying it's said, and I'm being a bit generous with that because the research seems pretty ironclad. And I mean, you're saying you're not sure about it, but that's fine. We can agree to disagree there. Says that agriculture accounts for 50%, of which farming accounts for 75% of the agricultural sector. So of that 50%, 3/4 of it is from farming. The other, I guess, 25% is, I'm assuming, from food growth, that kind of horticulture and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so what's is that tractor emissions?
I think a big part of it is methane, animals themselves. That's what the research seems to read. Not that I'm an expert in that area. Maybe we need to get another expert on to have a talk about that.
From what I can read with the methane, because that's probably directed at dairy, though we've been brought into it with sheep and beef, is a short-lived gas. And so doesn't have a lot of impact on.
So I'm gonna cut out here just because we're starting to run a bit longer, because what happens now actually is we get into a conversation around methane, and because I'm not an expert, it's I mean, it's not that I'm there's anything that there's not in there, but when someone says to me it's a short-lived gas, I'm like, it's a testable substance. What does that mean? And so the only thing we did then is we really went backwards and forwards a little bit about what methane is, and because I'm not an expert, I don't think you need to hear about that now. You can look at the full conversation on Patreon, or you can look it up yourself. But just so people know, the point that I made at the end of that was methane is a short-lived greenhouse gas, but that's because most gases last hundreds of years. Methane lasts decades. So the one thing I wanted to make sure people were aware of, based on my lacking in knowledge, but a little bit that I worked out then, was that a short-lived gas. If someone just says that, your mic's not on, by the way, Troy, in case you're not aware. A short-lived gas from some people makes it sound like, it'll, when you fart, the smell goes after 30 seconds. Well, a short-lived gas in the greenhouse gas world is decades. So when you're talking about the next 100 years being, or the next 30 years being so important in the climate change conversation, something that lasts decades is actually incredibly significant. So Chewy, you're much more knowledgeable than me in this. I've got one other little clip that I'm going to play, but
what about methane? What are you trying to say?
No. Yes, you're more full of gas than I am.
I actually hunted out a graph the other day. Unfortunately, I haven't got it on my computer. I've got it on my phone, so I can't show it. But yeah, agriculture accounts for 48.1% of the country's total emissions. 18.3% of that is methane. Actually 18.3 of the dairy cattle emissions is methane, which takes up 22.5% of that 48%. And then sheep, beef cattle, it's mainly dairy, but it just blew me away that percentage is more than our entire country's transport emissions. Like all the trucks, all the cars, everything that we use to move stuff around emits less than our dairy industry.
No.
Of which a lot of that dairy stuff is moved around by trucks. So that's part of that as well.
I think that the point that I made in that conversation, which actually I thought of, how I do, I kind of think as I speak, is that when people say it's only 0.25% on the world model, to me, you could equally therefore say, so if we double our pollution or our emissions, it won't matter. Our emissions, it won't matter then, because that'll make it 0.5%. Because if you don't care about 0.25%, why would you care about 0.5%? So if people use that argument that it's only 0.25%, then the counterpoint is, well, let's double it. Let's just not worry about it at all and get it to 0.5% and do anything we want. Because if we're not worried about 0.25% in the world, then surely we're not worried about 0.5% or 1/3%. So why would we even try and reduce it at all? Obviously pointing out the fact that it's a ludicrous statement because to compare it to the rest of the world. There's one other thing I wanted to play, and I haven't got this as a separate clip. This is actually, I've got the whole piece here, and I wanted to play it because there was a couple of times where Lucy was talking about, you know, I can only speak to my experience. I can only speak to my experience. It's like people who criticize you for appealing to authority. You know, often in this world of debunking, in this world of conspiracy theorists, not that this is one, I'm just saying in general, people will use, but that's a call to authority. You know, that's a bad thing. It's a call to authority. You can't do that. And then 3 minutes later, they'll pull out their experts to tell you why they're right. There was a little moment of that in this conversation where Lucy, for quite a number of times, and you've heard them in some of these clips, was talking about how she can only speak to her own experience when I asked her about something. But then when she was trying to make a point, she was making kind of global type points that's working for everybody. I just wanted to show you that clip as the last part of it. It's only 60 seconds or so.
Bacon, we don't want to waste any. We don't want to waste any. We don't go out of our way to have it run off or leach or do any of these things. So we're constantly trying to innovate all the time. We've got new grasses and grass mixes. So like we've got the clovers. Clovers are just fantastic. They have these little wee nodules that take nitrogen out of the air and they put it into the ground. But
Lucy, let me just say,
all the time.
But Lucy, as you've said a couple of times in this conversation, you can only speak for your farm. So right now, you're only speaking for your farm. Like when I've asked you a couple of questions,
discussion groups. So we're part, and we're always constantly working with each other. It's usually in the same area.
No, but listen, but it's disingenuous when I ask you a question and you go, I can only speak on behalf of us. And now you're offering it like it's the coverall speaking on behalf of everybody. So I accept what you're saying about your place and your farm and your space, but I guess my follow-up question about the polluting is in general. And that's pretty much it. Then we go into the conversation that we just played a bit of to do with pollution and what you do about the polluters. So that's the clips, Chewy. Anything you want to, oh my God, look at the size of us. Holy mackerel. Anything you want to add to this?
There's the graph.
All right. So okay.
So yeah, I found that really interesting. It kind of blew me away there. That's the breakdown of all of the country's emissions. And yeah, I was expecting the agriculture to be lower. I was expecting industrial sort of stuff and transport to be a bit higher than it was, really. But yeah, I mean, I want to come back to what I said there about stoking the rural urban divide.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of that we hate farmers, that the cities hate farmers. We don't value what they do. I honestly don't think there is anybody in the country that underestimates what the farming sector means to this country.
Yeah,
I think we have some of the best, most efficient and progressive farmers in the world because they've had to be. You know, if you look back at New Zealand history, they had the rug pulled out from them with almost no notice during the 80s, and they had to adapt and they had to survive. And this is another moment where we are asking them to do the same. And a lot of them have been ahead of the curve. A lot of them are looking at the old ways of doing things and taking the good and getting rid of the bad. And then there are some people that are just stuck. They don't want to be told what to do. They don't want to change. But neither one of those groups speaks for everybody else. So don't fall for playing us off against each other. It's divide and conquer. We've all got to go there together. There's a reason that this piece of work that the government is doing, it refers to being in the same boat, because we fucking are.
And just remember, you've seen those clips from tonight's show. If you want to see the whole conversation, it's on our Patreon. There it is right there. Lucy Thomson from Groundswell in Dunedin, one of the leaders of the Groundswell protest in Dunedin today, to attempt to tell the government that enough is enough when it comes to legislation around farming. If you want to check that out, all you need to do is become a patron. And the way you become a patron is to head to patreon.com/Big Hairy News. Everyone who's a patron in the next 24 hours also has the ability to join into our group conversation, our Q&A private chat that a couple of us will be having on Saturday morning. If you want to get involved, you are more than welcome. And I think that's about it for us for that topic. Chewy, anything else you want to highlight? Any comments you want to highlight in there?
I got a nice one from Steve there. Really appreciate your candor, Pat. Way to keep her engaged. Much respect and gratitude for managing to hold the conversation together.
Cool. Thank you.
Yep.
Look. To be fair, some people will like it, and some people will hate it. My style of basically my style takes longer than most's because I kind of want people to be able to say what they need to say, and I want to be able to delve deeper into them. The way you find out about, what someone believes is to expand on what they're thinking, and that sometimes takes several extra minutes. So the conversation on the Big Hairy News Patreon is 50 minutes long. The clips we've played you, there is more than just that. We haven't just done like a movie trailer showing you all the good bits and nothing else in there. There's still other bits and pieces you want to see in there. But thank you for the comments. Some people will really like it. Some people will be a bit meh about it, and some people will hate the style that I use for talking to people. And I guess that's what makes the world go round.
And sort of circling back to something we were saying here, Simon Hughes isn't is it Groundswell, AstroTurf organization? If you're not familiar with that term, it's an organization that is set up to appear to be something else, appear to be a legitimate grassroots movement.
Yeah, and thank you for reminding me, because just to get that clear, I said wasn't connected to taxpayers unions. In November 2021, controversy emerged on social media after links to the New Zealand Taxpayers Union, a right-wing pressure group, became apparent after a registration to the protest's web address was listed as, quote, NZ Taxpayers Union. The registration subsequently was taken down and replaced with the Campaign Company Limited, a business in the name of Jordan Williams, who's the CEO or the
very smooth Jordan.
Whatever
smooth.
Whatever the head dude is over at the Taxpayers Unions, the organization's director. So there you go. He's the director of the Taxpayers Union. So yeah, I just wanted to make sure that if they were, we were clear on that, and I didn't give out any fake news. We don't want any fake news.
And let's be clear here, that doesn't take away from the fact that a lot of the farmers that are involved in Groundswell probably do have legitimate fears and concerns. And
totally.
That's valid as well. But again, when you're talking about another group coming in and weaponizing that for their own aims, again, integrity goes out the window, and I can't respect them for doing it.
Yeah. And look,
there's a term, a useful idiot. And, that's what I think Taxpayers Union is doing in that instance. It benefits them.
I think one of the things about Lucy that I appreciated so much is like I can hear it. I mean, if you've got a business and you're running a business, and all of a sudden, your product, let's say that's your beef or sheep or your widget, is going to reduce in numbers, and your costs are going up. There was a part in that conversation where she talked about her farm. I've got friends in Huntley who run a farm, and it's quite it's not flat. It's quite a lot of hills and stuff, and they really like their farm because it makes it interesting for riding bikes and stuff on. But actually, when it comes down to it, it's not the best, per square meterage use of land if you've got cliffs and hills, and because flat land like the Canterbury Plains is the place you get the most money per square meter. It sounds like Lucy's farm is one of those ones with lots of hills and cliffs and crags and stuff. And so she talked about having to fence off a stream so that cattle couldn't get into it. And to fence off the stream, because it was in a gorge, they were going to have to fence off something like 300 acres or 300 hectares or a huge amount of land to actually do it. I mean, imagine what that's going to cost. So I get it. And that's why I don't want to just kind of shit on these people who are concerned and worried about this. Who I will shit on, though, is it's the instigators again. It's exactly like the protests in Wellington. It was those people who are instigating the protest who should be the focus of your ire, not necessarily the people in the tents. I feel a bit the same about this. It's the people like the Taxpayers Union getting involved in this. They're obviously looking for dissension to further a right-wing narrative to work against the current government. Now, we're all entitled to do that. We're political animals, and we're entitled to use whatever we want to push our side forward. But it's filling people with fear and misinformation, in my opinion, to get the end that they're trying to look. It's a little bit like you get into a boxing ring with someone, you want a fair fight. If someone's loaded up one of their gloves with a horseshoe, then it's not a fair fight. It's like if Labour warrants being expelled at the next election for their lack of whatever, so be it. If mis and disinformation is being spread about the current government, that puts the thumb on the scale to get them out, then I have more of a problem with that, because it's not a fair fight, especially if it's actively being done. And I think you can see within the Taxpayers Union and Groundswell that they are aware, because they changed the name of the registry, that maybe they shouldn't have been outed to being involved with it, because you can see it's like your petticoat is showing, Mr. Williams. You know? Anyway, look, the last thing is, it's only a 60-second clip, but it's in the actual promo, so we better play it to find out the date for the Sharma Drama. Let me play this super quick for people.
Hamiltonians, get your voting pens ready. A date has been set for the Hamilton West by-election, triggered by the shock resignation of Gaurav Sharma. Political editor Jenna Lynch joins us now. And Jenna, when's the big day?
Clear your schedules on December the 10th, Hamiltonians. The countdown for the Hamilton West by-election, or by-electron, if you will, is on. Looking at the field, National, Labour and Gaurav Sharma are all claiming to be the long shot here. So according to them, we're looking at a 3-horse race with an underdog in every lane. The two big dogs are yet to select their candidates. There are challenges on both sides. National has a lot to prove on the diversity front after its pale male showing in Tauranga. For Labour, they need a strong, strappy candidate for what will be a cost of living by-election with a side of the Sharma scandal. And curveball, this one seems ripe for a minor or major comeback. I'm looking at you, New Zealand First. Winston Peters has just told me they're yet to meet as a party to decide whether they'll run.
There you go. December the 10th. You heard it here, not first. Like
it's Winston moving to Hamilton.
Well, he moved to Northland for a while, and he lives in Tauranga, and now he's living in Auckland. So who knows? But that's us. Look, Chewy, there's a bunch of content tonight. Anything you want to wrap up with? Anything from the chat you want to throw out there before we head off?
No, look, chat's been great tonight. I can't put up everything because I've starred so many comments that we didn't get to. I love reading through them all. So you guys are great, and much love. Right. Also, especially to someone who shouted out my amazing conniption T-shirt.
Oh, I saw that. I didn't realize that they were talking to you.
Thank you for noticing.
I thought someone was having a conniption.
It's a great word.
That is a good word.
And it's a friend of mine's band, which is an acquired taste.
Yep. And there you go. There's Gareth again talking about the full interview on patreon.com/Big Hero News. Lucy was considerate and thoughtful during the interview as well. I don't agree with her, but look, okay, I'll show you one more thing. It's not going to take long, and because Chewy, we always got to go for at least 3 hours. This is what I often try and achieve. I'll show you the last 30 seconds of the conversation, just to go that you can have sort of disagreements with people and end up not being a complete twat towards that person. This is how the conversation ended. I just looked at Wikipedia. I know this can be changeable by anywhere. It says here that it says 20.
I might even vote for you. I'll tell you. Hey, like I said, the invitation's there. You're more than welcome. Bring a friend. I might even vote for you. I'll vote for you. And I won't spread the flour all over the floor.
Thanks, Lucy. Have a good one.
Hey, thank you. Bye-bye.
So you can have respectable conversations with people that end with two people smiling, even if, although we didn't banter too much in disagreement because I'm not the expert to disagree with her, but this is pretty much how we roll most of the time. There is going to be more heated times without question, but you've just got a version of Pat's style when it comes to interviewing perhaps people in different parts of the political or opinion sphere. Would that be fair to say, Chewy?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, so do you want to go? You want to come out? So it's 45 minutes past Mosgill, and she's promising baking. I don't know how that'll go with the diet, but maybe we should get out there.
I'd need gummies.
All right, sorry, I cut you off. What were you going to say then?
I don't know, but it was pertinent and would leave people thinking for the rest of the evening.
Very good. So let's save that for tomorrow night. Maybe we may even get back to that M&M thing finally tomorrow night that we were supposed to do last night.
Yes.
All right, team. Thanks so much for being involved tonight. Appreciate you all. Patreon.com/Big Hairy News as it's going along the bottom of the screen right now. And we will catch you tomorrow night from 10 p.m. for another edition of Big Hairy News.